The air in the Senate Banking Committee hearing was heavy with anticipation, the kind of charged silence that comes before something big. Senator Tim Scott leaned forward, voice crisp and cutting as he locked eyes with Representative Jasmine Crockett. "You talk a lot about helping communities, but what have you actually done other than post online?" His words weren't just criticism, they were a calculated strike, designed to shame her on live television. Millions watched as the question hung in the air, but Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't look away. Instead, a slow, knowing smile spread across her face, the kind that signals someone has been waiting for this moment. What Scott didn't know was that Crockett had come prepared, not just for the hearing, but for this exact confrontation. She had done her homework, and she wasn't about to let a senator with a long resume and short receipts try to humiliate her unchallenged. What followed wasn't just a response. It was a political beatdown that would reverberate across every platform and news outlet in the country. The room was filled with seasoned politicians, media teams, staffers, and lobbyists, but suddenly all eyes were locked on the two of them. Scott, the senior Republican who'd built a career on conservative credentials and cautious commentary, had assumed this would be an easy jab at a first-term Democrat. He was wrong. Crockett didn't rise to anger. She didn't shout. What she did instead was infinitely more effective. She dismantled his argument with the precision of someone who had spent years fighting for justice in courtrooms, not sound bites. For years, Tim Scott had been the Republican Party's favored voice on race, measured, compliant, and rarely controversial. But the contradiction at the heart of his public persona had finally been forced into the open. He had cast himself as the bridge between Black America and conservative values, but Crockett was about to show just how shaky that bridge really was. Crockett was no stranger to being underestimated. A criminal defense attorney turned congresswoman from Dallas, she entered Washington not to be polite, but to be effective. Young, unfiltered, and laser-focused, she brought a different kind of energy, one that scared the establishment, and in moments like this showed exactly why. Her district was working class and diverse. Her campaign had been rooted in economic fairness, systemic reform, and direct action. She wasn't interested in being palatable. She was interested in being useful. And in that hearing room, she was about to show America what that actually looked like. Scott had been waiting to strike back ever since Crockett called out his voting record on national TV, accusing him of voting against every major policy aimed at lifting up Black families. His team had fumed, demanding retractions, but Crockett hadn't backed down. She had receipts, and she wasn't afraid to use them. So when Scott took the mic and launched into his rehearsed monologue, full of condescension and smug superiority, he assumed he was cornering her. But it was he who had walked straight into the trap. "I've passed real laws," he said. "All I see from you is social media noise." The air shifted instantly. Even his Republican colleagues looked uneasy. He was veering into personal attacks, and worse, he was underestimating the very person who had made a career out of proving doubters wrong. What Scott didn't grasp was that Crockett's social media strategy wasn't a vanity project. It was an access point. It was how she brought policy to people who felt shut out by traditional politics. Every tweet was strategic, every viral moment intentional. She set down her pen, looked him straight in the eye, and the room waited. Scott kept digging, interrupting the chairman, insisting this needed to be said. He crossed a line even seasoned senators usually avoided, accusing Crockett of caring more about internet clout than her community. It was deeply personal, it was reckless, and it was about to backfire in a way that would haunt his career. She leaned in, voice cool, and calmly said, "Senator Scott, since you're asking, let me clarify what I've done while you've been busy playing the Republican Party's favorite black prop." Gasps, silence. She had detonated a political truth bomb in the middle of a live broadcast, and she wasn't done. In the span of minutes, Crockett laid out a meticulous list of legislative wins, dozens of co-sponsored bills, millions in federal funds secured for community programs, and hundreds of constituents helped through direct casework. She didn't boast, she documented. She turned Scott's arrogance into a stage for her own record. And then she twisted the knife. You voted against expanding Medicaid, against raising the minimum wage, against student debt relief, against nearly every policy that could have improved life for people in your own state, and you want to question my commitment. Scott sat frozen, color rising in his face. But Crockett wasn't finished. You stand on stages asking for applause while people in your state can't afford insulin. I show up for the people who sent me here, even if it doesn't get me on cable news. Her voice never wavered. The contrast was brutal. He was status quo, she was change, and America saw it live. Social media blew up. Hashtags trended. TikToks broke down every line she delivered. Instagram was flooded with clips. Twitter called it a masterclass. Her response wasn't just effective, it became a cultural moment. Even major media couldn't ignore it. CNN aired the full clip. MSNBC called it a turning point. Fox News tried to spin it, but had no answer. And Scott's team scrambled, releasing bland statements trying to change the narrative, but the damage had already been done. His attempt to look strong had revealed his weakness, her strength unshakable. Donors poured into Crockett's campaign. Speaking invitations flooded her office. She was no longer just a freshman congresswoman. She was a national voice. She had exposed the hollowness of performative politics and reminded people that actual work, done quietly and consistently, always outshines empty bravado. What unfolded in that hearing room wasn't just a viral moment. It was a shift. It was the old guard getting checked by the new. It was a woman who had fought her way from the streets of South Dallas to Capitol Hill, reminding the country that leadership isn't about who talks loudest. It's about who shows up and delivers. Jasmine Crockett didn't just hold her ground. She obliterated the ground Scott thought he stood on. And when it was over, the country wasn't talking about Scott's attack. They were talking about her power.
They still are.